Legit. Okay, we're recording now, but he's going to play the music. There's like a standard music that he would play.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Aloha! Good evening. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Naimbaga rabii. Maayong gabi sa inyong tanan. I'm yours truly, Dr. Mary Faye Aczon-Armstrong, founding president of the Asian American Pacific Islander Nurse Association of Nevada and professor in nursing at Roseman University of Health Sciences College of Nursing. Here we are on a Monday night. Thank you for tuning in. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig at pagtangkilik sa aming programa, Healthy Mondays. Tonight, our theme is caregiving around the clock. Aligned with the theme for the month of November, celebration of National Family Caregivers Awareness Month. Celebrated every November, National Family Caregivers Month is a time to recognize and honor family caregivers across the country. It offers an opportunity to raise awareness of caregiving issues, educate communities, and increase support for caregivers. National Family Caregivers Month in November provides resources for self-care, advocacy, and de-stressing for our caregivers. The month is dedicated to supporting caregivers as they care for others. This year's theme, as I mentioned, is caregiving around the clock. Families are the primary source of support for older adults and people with disabilities in the United States. Many caregivers work and also provide care, experiencing conflicts between competing responsibilities. Research indicates caregiving also takes a significant emotional, physical, and financial toll. Have you heard of the sandwich generation caregivers? I'm one of them. When my parents were suffering from chronic illnesses, I also took care of them while taking care of my own family. With nearly half of all caregivers over age 50, many are vulnerable to a decline in their own health. Studies show that coordinated support services can reduce caregiver depression, anxiety, and stress, and enable them to provide care longer, which avoids or delays the need for costly institutional care. Tonight, we invited a national caregiving expert, and I'm excited and honored to have her in our program. She is a corporate gerontologist and author and founder, CEO of Caregiving Club. Sherry Snelling serves as the gerontology expert for First Clearing, the wealth advisor affiliate of Wells Fargo. Welcome to Healthy Monday, Sherry, and thank you so much for being our guest tonight. And please share with our listeners more about yourself and how you started Caregiving Club.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really thrilled to be here and talk about my passion, which is caregiving. Just to give you a little background. So I started in the caregiving world professionally about 18 years ago. I was working for a very large health insurance company, and we had a program that was a support program for caregivers who were in the workplace. So it was sold into employer groups to provide some research and referral assistance, and maybe even a little bit of care management to create care plans for employees. And since then, I've gone on to work on a variety of different advisory boards for the National Alliance for Caregiving, and did some work with Alzheimer's Association and the CDC and other government and nonprofit agencies. And at the same time, I started Caregiving Club, which was really dedicated to doing two things. One is consulting for companies, both small startup companies that are mostly in technology and looking at the innovations that can help us as caregivers, but also, as you mentioned, companies like Wells Fargo and other large organizations or employers who are looking to either, like for instance, with Wells Fargo, what I did is I educated their financial wealth advisors on the caregiving challenges that maybe their clients were facing and how they could best advise them. And then I do a lot of work in the employer channel where we do educational webinars and podcasts and other things. And I wrote my book, A Cast of Caregivers, on caregiving. So you can check that out. And I just recently launched a podcast. So you can go to our caregivingclub.com and you can find the links to those podcasts where I interview some celebrity caregivers, but also talk a lot about caregiver wellness, how to find that balance and self-care, which we know is so tough when we're caregiving and we have all these other responsibilities, like you just mentioned with the sandwich generation. You're working, you've got your children and other family, and now you've also got older parents or in-laws or grandparents you're caring for. So we do a lot. And then I do a little Me Time Monday. That's part of my Healthy Monday support of the Caregiver Monday campaign that was started. I do a Me Time Monday wellness hack, which is a little 5-minute exercise at the end of every podcast where I lead caregivers through something that, again, will help us find a little bit of that calm in the chaos.
It's such a blessing. Oh, wow. I can feel your passion about this topic. And it's such a blessing that I connected with Cherry and with
Yes.
you. So it really resonates, the Healthy Monday concept that we have established here in the Southern Nevada, Las Vegas and Henderson. I also pulled out something from the Mayo Clinic about caregiving.
Mhm.
And it says that as the population ages, more caregiving is being provided by people who aren't healthcare professionals.
Right.
And about 1 to 3 adults in the United States provides care to other adults as informal caregivers. And
Right.
then they define a caregiver is anyone who provides help to another person in need, such as an ill spouse or partner, a disabled child, or an aging relative. However, family members who are actively caring for an older adult often don't self-identify themselves as caregiver.
Yes.
Recognizing this role can help caregivers receive support that they need. So what did you find when you were interviewing, especially those celebrities? What did you find about their struggles?
Yeah, well, what's really interesting that you just kind of touched on from that Mayo Clinic description and report is that when we're a family member caring for, as you mentioned, it could be a parent or in-law, grandparent, spouse, special needs child, even a sibling or a friend, we don't naturally call ourselves caregivers. We always think that's a professional role, right? That's somebody who's doing professional care work. We're still the daughter, the wife, the sister, the son, or whomever that relationship is. And I think that makes it very difficult then for these family caregivers to really tap into the resources and some of the services that are out there that can help family caregivers. And one of the things that has been really interesting, I wanted to share with your audience. So a couple of things. We know there's 53 million Americans right now who are in this active role of family caregiver. And among that population, we know that there are about maybe close to 17% or so that are in the Asian American and Pacific Islanders community. And another report that came out from a group called Embracing Cares found that over the last couple of years, of course, during the pandemic, when all of us, I think, were suffering from a lot more stress and, anxiety and other things, family caregivers in particular were especially burdened. And possibly that is because, we were so concerned about our older loved ones and their vulnerabilities in terms of this virus. And so the report said that of the caregivers, 68% said their emotional health was severely impacted, and 72% said they're suffering from burnout. But here's the important thing that I took out of that report. 80% said of the younger generations said they're suffering from burnout. So if you're in the millennial generation or even the Gen Z generation, there was actually more emotional health burden and higher levels of depression among that younger group of caregivers. And we're very concerned about that because we know that when we don't manage our stress and our emotional health in particular, that can lead then to downstream health effects as we grow older that will impact us. So we want to be able to help caregivers today to manage through those emotional health effects.
It's a domino effect. It builds up. I remember having a back injury, and when I was already in a desk job and didn't realize that it was a compilation of how I didn't take care of my back. So
Yeah.
the same concept. It's interesting you mentioned our millennial and next gen population are the one taking care of their family. And you mentioned about our listeners out there, Filipinos, Asian in particular, are ones that they would say, we take care of our own. And so there's this resistance of placing our loved ones in nursing homes or somebody's home.
Right.
In Hawaii, moving from Hawaii, there's a lot of foster homes and care homes in Hawaii. So then that kind of balance out that resistance on having your loved one live at someone's home instead of your home.
Right.
Unfortunately, people are working. We now have two people working, husband and wife, and who's going to take care of mom
Right.
when she's at home? So I think there's a lot of resistance with that, and also the not self-identifying yourself as a caregiver, and so you lose out with what is available out in the community as a caregiver.
Right. Well, you also touched upon something else. And again, I think this is probably more prevalent in our Asian American Pacific Islander communities. And that is almost this filial responsibility. It's almost like a cultural code to not seek outside help, but to take care of it within the family. That puts a lot more pressure and burden, of course, on the family members to step into that role. And I think the younger generation who may be either more acculturated or, just struggling with, well, I've got all these other things in my life. How am I possibly going to take on this additional burden? Also want to touch upon something else, particularly like, for instance, in our Filipino communities and our Latino communities, those are the people who are also serving as professional caregivers, and they're in the healthcare profession. And so we forget very often that just because you might be providing care work and be a healthcare professional, that doesn't mean that you are not a family caregiver as well. So you're doing a day job of caregiving, and then you have your evening, weekend, 24/7 job as a family caregiver. So I think that it does put a lot of that added pressure on those families. We know that the Asian American community is more likely to have a multi-generational household where your older loved ones or your in-laws or whomever are living with you. And again, there's good and bad, there's benefits and advantages, but there's also that stress of not being able to kind of get away and find a little sanctuary, a little me time, if you will, which is why I call my thing Me Time Monday.
Yeah.
But to find that time when you've got everybody under one roof, I think that makes it a lot more challenging.
Yes, and that we as in the healthcare field, we call it respite care. And I
Yes.
think more and more it's now prevalent, even before the COVID-19, where there are now facilities who are offering respite care. So then you can go on vacation, the caregiver, the family caregivers can go on vacation even for 2 weeks and then come back refreshed and take back their loved ones who they are taking care of.
Yeah. I think the hard thing for family caregivers is to accept that that is not, they feel guilty over leaving their loved one even for 5 minutes. And what we have to realize is if we don't keep our own health and wellness at peak performance, we won't be able to continue to perform. And if something should happen to us, if we're more vulnerable, let's say we know that, for instance, because of the effects of stress on the body, that family caregivers often have higher level of stress hormones. They have less antibodies to fight things like colds and viruses. And of course, we mentioned the depression, which we know is also a significant health issue. But when we don't take care of ourselves and something does happen, who will step into our role? And I think we have to keep that in the back of our mind, that it's a good thing for us to get a break, to refresh, get good sleep, try to get out in nature and just, listen to the leaves and the trees and, have the fresh wind in your face or, whatever it is. But any little break that you can get is really beneficial. And whether that comes from getting a friend or a family to step in, or whether it's through some kind of a professional respite care, it really is important. And it's something we have to put into our plan, that when we become a caregiver, we're now taking care of two lives. We're taking care of the person that we're caring for, but we're also taking care of ourselves. So that has to be part of the formula.
Correct. And as caregiver, and then I'm reading off of Mayo Clinic information also. As a caregiver, you may be so focused on your loved one that you don't realize that your own health and well-being are suffering. And they mention about some signs of caregiver stress
Mhm.
in their website. One is feeling overwhelmed or constantly worried, feeling tired often, getting too much sleep or not enough sleep,
Right.
gaining or losing weight, becoming easily irritated or angry, losing interest in activities you used to enjoy, feeling sad and having frequent headaches. Oh, that's me. Bodily pain or other physical problems, or this is one, abusing alcohol or drugs, including prescription medications. Because
Yes.
too much stress, especially over a long time, can harm your health, as you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
And as a caregiver, you're more likely to experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. And in addition, may not get enough sleep or physical activity or eat a balanced diet,
Right.
which all increases risk of medical problems such as heart disease and diabetes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the other one I want to mention, because it's something of concern. I do a lot of work in the Alzheimer's and dementia community. We know that people who are chronically lonely have a 40% higher risk of developing Alzheimer's later in life. We also, this is a really staggering report that came out from the University of California at San Francisco just recently, and they were stating that if you have chronic levels of depression, so that's not being managed by any kind of medication or any kind of therapy, but in your teens and your early 20s, so this might even be maybe before you're caregiving, or maybe you're a backup caregiver to your parent, your younger person. If you don't manage through that depression, again, it's going to increase your Alzheimer's risk by 72%. So I think that what we need to recognize is some of the things that we maybe aren't doing for our health today. We think, oh, I can put it off. I don't need to get sleep right now. I'm caregiving. I don't need to eat nutritiously. I don't have any time. We don't realize that it accumulates so that later in life, those things that we didn't do so well are going to, become a burden for us in our own health. So again, I go back to being able to get support, talk to others. I find that talking to, whether it's a formal support group or whether it's just somebody you can kind of have a conversation with and vent your frustrations, vent your concerns, your stress, whatever, and then get that out. It's almost like you want to, release those toxic feelings from your body so that you can kind of refresh yourself. But I always tell people, think about this, particularly with sleep. Your body is like your smartphone. Now, we know that if we don't charge that smartphone, it will not work. And then we're cut off from all forms of life, right? Because we all live on our phones these days. Well, if you don't recharge your body, then you will not function well in the next day or week or whatever. So you really have to get that recharge. I know it's easy to say. I always have people say, okay, I know I should do this, but how? And I always say, don't think of it as, oh, I've got to lose 20 pounds, or, oh, I have to go to the gym 5 times a week, or, all these big things that almost seem like too much of a hurdle, too much of a burden. Take little tiny steps, little things that you can do. I do something called the brain health hack, wellness hack. And it's just, you take 5 minutes, you step back from your computer and your screens, and you do things within the senses. So you look out at a beautiful window and you look at the trees for a minute, and you just kind of wonder in nature, and you listen to music or you listen to sounds around you. Maybe you have something that you love to touch that makes you feel comforted. It's a soft blanket, or I've got my puppy sitting next to me, so I pat her during the day when I'm working, and it makes me feel better and kind of connected. Or a little taste of something, maybe a little piece of chocolate that you keep at your desk, whatever it is that kind of gives you a little break and gives you that, okay, I can take a breath. It's 5 minutes. Everybody can do that. And even those little incremental 5 minutes will add up and make you feel better.
yes, the simple things in life that brings you joy. I mean, 5 minutes is 5 minutes. And also in the Mayo Clinic, you have been mentioning it, to accept help, to help manage caregiver stress. You need to accept help.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you're mentioning about the failure responsibility, you feel responsible that you have to take care of mom because mom or dad and mom and dad because they took care of you when you were growing up. So
Right.
that's responsibility and obligation. Um, Another one is focus on what you are able to provide.
Mhm.
Sometimes they feel guilty because they can't provide for things that they should be providing.
Right.
Um, setting realistic goals, getting connected, as you mentioned, you need to have that even one confident to just, oh, I'm so
Right.
tired. And
Yes.
I remember,
Or to be able to say, mom's driving me crazy today,
yes,
and you feel guilty for even thinking that, but it's true. And you
yes,
want to tell it to somebody who isn't going to judge you,
judge you. Yes.
right? And they're just going to say, I get it. I understand.
I remember the difference between my mom and dad. My dad is, he wants up to the very end, he wants to do things for himself, like
Right.
very independent. I would like to feed him, but then he would demand and he would want to do it himself. My mom is take care of me.
Right.
So you have to kind of balance out, between mom and dad and their
Oh,
preference.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between taking care of moms and dads. And if
Yes.
I can give the audience any clue, and these are generalities, all of our families and personalities are different, but for the most part, moms want to feel secure and safe. So
Yes.
whatever we can do to help them feel safe and secure, that will be a huge help for them. Dads, on the other hand, they still want to feel kind of in charge and in control. They don't want to feel any kind of loss of, I'm not making the choices, I'm not making the decisions. So giving them that sense of control and letting them be, a partner in care is really important in how we deal with our parents or our in-laws.
Yes, that's this variation in what you have to deal with. And can you imagine our younger generation? They have to deal with a lot of distractors and stress the
Yeah.
world has thrown at them. I remember when I was growing up, it's just like I go out and play with whatever nature has. We cut like little leaves and the whatever we can pick in the around us. Now they have like computers and all the social media, and I think that being a caregiver on top of that
Yeah.
is stressful enough.
Yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
think that's where we're seeing much more of this emotional burden. As much as sometimes we can be physically tired or not maybe, exercising or eating as well, which is all more about the physical body. I think we often forget that the psychological and emotional mental health effects are just as important. And when you feel like you're missing out, when you feel like, wow, I've got to go home after school and help my mom take care of my grandparent instead of going out with my friends or doing this, that's really tough on the younger generation because they want to be able to enjoy that life, but they know they've got this family obligation or responsibility. And so I think, again, finding ways to balance that, not always giving up everything that you want to do, but recognizing that there are also really great silver linings. We don't want to talk about caregiving as a negative because I believe there are huge benefits in being a caregiver. We learn patience, we learn empathy. We also get really great gifts. I learned in caring for my grandparents and also both my dad and my stepdad, who I've lost within the last 7 years, both of them, the conversations that I would have that probably wouldn't have happened if they had been healthy and well, or the ability for me to really know my grandparents, was really a great gift that really still carries me through to this day, that I think about. I'm so lucky that I got the chance to do that and to know them and to learn from them. And so if there's a way to kind of think in our minds that, yes, this is a responsibility, it's an obligation, but I might be getting something that my friends don't have. I might be getting this wonderful gift. And if we can think in those terms, I think sometimes that helps lift a little bit of that emotional burden.
Yeah, and the stories that you hear, uh, because they're not going in and about, then you have the opportunity to listen to the stories. And I
Yeah.
remember stories that I would have not heard, if I was going in and out. And you're right, the joy of caregiving is invaluable. It's nothing compared. And I think that if we share with our listeners out there that caregiving is just not providing physical needs,
Right.
emotional needs, and spiritual needs, especially for those
Yes.
culture who look up to their elders, that
Yes.
they're advisors. And
Yep.
even if they are no longer healthy or they are disabled, you still learn from them. There's a lot of wisdom, is the wisdom that
Yes.
they share with you.
That's the good thing about getting older.
Yeah.
You supposedly get a lot wiser. Well, you hit on something so important too. I think often when we have maybe children or adult children who are they came home from college during the pandemic because the colleges and universities were doing everything online, we don't want to burden them, right? We want to give them that space to be that child, to have that youth and all of that. But at the same time, one of the things that we found in studies is that intergenerational connections actually help younger generations feel more resilient. They are able to deal with bullying and some of the meanness that we find on social media better. And also it gives them a sense of self. You are connected now to a long line, of family history. And so I think sometimes we overlook that. And one of the great silver linings, if you will, if there's anything good that came out of the pandemic, we refocused on family. And I think that was something that was starting to maybe float away from us, and it brought us back together. And I think that's actually, again, I think that's a real benefit health-wise to a lot of us, is to have that sense of family, that sense of purpose and meaning in our lives, that it's not just about us and what I want to do, but it's about this bigger picture. Now, you still need to find a little time for yourself, but at the same time, I don't want people to think of caregiving as only a burden. I think that's not what we want. That's not the message we want to send.
I think it's that belongingness. The
Yes.
COVID-19 global pandemic really brought about the belongingness that we are just not on our own, because it really affected a lot of people globally, worldwide. It's
Yep.
just not here in Nevada or Hawaii or New York, wherever you are. It's happening to everybody, and
Yes.
having to be staying home. And it really helps us to look at basic things, like now we're able to cook our own meal. We now know what's going into that meal.
Right.
And taking the time, we now have the time to prepare. And I think that there is this up and downs, all the
Yeah.
advantages and disadvantages that happen, but mostly positive things.
Yeah. And I think also as women, I think there's just a default that, as the woman of the house, if you will, the wife or the mom, that we are the default caregivers typically. And again, I think that doesn't mean though that we can't recruit a care team. And
Yeah.
there are roles that your kids can play. There are roles that your spouse or partner could play. Your siblings, if they don't live close or they're not there to maybe give you that break, well, maybe they can, pay for certain things financially, or maybe they can fly in and take care of mom while you take a week-long vacation with your family. So I think there are creative ways for us to get others to help us out as caregivers. We just have to take a step back and think about, okay, who's within my social circle, if you will, that I can now recruit onto my care team to help me out.
And I remember towards the last days of my dad went into hospice, and we wanted to make sure there's someone with him all the time, 24 hours. So we gathered everybody, including my nieces and nephews, and put in everybody's name in the one of our nephews is good in computers. And so he put in everybody's name, and he plugged in that, okay, you're going to be with grandpa from 9 to 10 or 9 to 11. And I think I was in nursing school, and they go, these are the things, like it's almost like you're working in the hospital and you plug in everybody for their shift. So
Right.
that's what happened. We're a big family with 11 children, with grandchildren and great grandchildren. So that's one thing that we were able to plug in everybody to be with my dad
Right. Well, and
every
you
hour.
bring up such a great point, because caregiving is a lot of different things. It's not just the daily hands-on care, the maybe the bathing, the feeding, and that, or the companionship for an older loved one, but it's also the paperwork, right? The insurance paperwork, the medical claims, the insurance, the legal documentation that sometimes we need to kind of see what's in place, the financial planning. And if you've got, again, people in your family that you can assign, you become like the CEO of caregiving, and you say, okay, you're going to be the chief financial officer. You're going to take care of all the paperwork over here. Maybe you have somebody in your family who is a nurse, and you say, could you go with mom or dad to the doctor? Because you're going to know the questions to ask. I may not know. So whatever we could do to tap into that expertise in our own family, again, it really helps caregivers take that burden off of being the one that has to do everything.
Yes, and it happens a lot. I think one of my friends in Hawaii, she kind of confided in me, you feel like I'm the only one doing everything. And I said, well, delegate, if that's the word, that if you delegate these things, this is what I'm doing, and then delegate. Sometimes it's hard if you're the youngest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I often, I talk to a lot of caregivers, and they say, yeah, but nobody will take care of mom as well as I will. And I say, you're right. Nobody is going to be able to provide that level of love and care, but you still need to get a break, because if something happens to you, then what? So give yourself, you're not giving it up. You're not being a bad daughter or a bad wife or a bad granddaughter by recruiting people to give you those little breaks that you're going to need. So accepting that help, I think, is a real challenge for caregivers, but there's ways to do it. And there's a lot of online tools now too that will help you create a community where you have a calendar, and maybe it's not even taking care of your loved one. Maybe it's, I need my son picked up from soccer, and yet I need to be with dad, or, I need a meal made because I've got to go with mom to a doctor's appointment and I won't be home to make, dinner tonight. Could somebody drop off a meal? So it's other things too that we can get help with, rather than thinking, oh, they're going to be the one to step into my shoes as the caregiver for my loved one. No, you've got a lot of other responsibilities in life. Have them take care of picking up the dry cleaning and getting gas in the car. Anything that takes time, away from your caregiving, maybe you can get help with that.
Yes, those are really great suggestions that you made, Sherry. I'm going to go back to the Mayo Clinic handout that I have about respite care, that it may be hard to imagine living your loved one in someone else's care, but taking a break, just like you said, can be one of the best things you do for yourself, as well as the person you're caring for. And most communities have some type of respite care available. And we mentioned about there's in-home respite, where healthcare aides come to your home to provide companionship, nursing services, or both.
Yeah.
There's also the adult care centers and programs, where some centers provide care for both older adults and young children, and the two groups may spend time together. And I've seen this in Hawaii.
Yes.
When I was dropping off my kids for preschool, and then right beside the building is the adult daycare. And
Yeah.
my children said, yeah, we made drawings for grandpa next door. And so
Yeah.
it's a good setup. I haven't seen it here in Nevada though.
Well, it's something that, Hawaii tends to be a best practice when it comes to caregiving. And so we need to take some of these really creative programs and replicate them, because I think I love those types of programs. It gives energy to the older adults. And for little kids, it's like, oh, they get this sage elder who they get to kind of, talk to or do something with. It's just wonderful stuff. And, I think anytime that we can create those things, and there's a lot of ways to get respite care. So here's some suggestions. First of all, tap into what your employer may offer. Sometimes there are benefits that will help you, whether it's called backup care, which is more of an emergency care service, but a lot of companies offer those now, a lot of employers. If your loved one is a veteran, the VA offers 30 hours of free respite to family caregivers of veterans. There are organizations like nonprofits like the Alzheimer's Association, or Hilarity for Charity, which is in the dementia community, but they will provide grants for respite if you qualify. And so there's different ways that we can tap into some of that respite care, but it is really important to get that break however you do get it. You mentioned drawings, and I just want to bring something up for your audience. There's a really wonderful YouTube video. You can go Google it, but it's called Drawings for My Grandchildren. And it was a part of the Unlonely Project at Harvard University, and it was in their film festival. It is the most delightful, heartwarming video that you're going to see about grandparents, grandchildren, and how to help our older population not feel disconnected and isolated, even if they don't live near their grandchildren. So you should check it out. It's really great.
Okay, I hope that our well, time flies when we're having fun. Look
I
at the
know.
time. So I'm really excited when I read about your bio, and I was looking at that you're all over the place. One interview said she's all over the place. She's there and there and there. So now you're here with us here in
Yes.
Las Vegas. And I just wanted to say that that one of this, when you mentioned here about you aren't alone, that's the title of this one that I'm going to be reading. And if you're like many caregivers, you have a hard time asking for help.
Yes.
Unfortunately, this attitude can lead to feeling isolated, frustrated, and even depressed. So
Yes.
rather than struggling on your own, and I guess I'm appealing to our listeners out there, take advantage of local resources, as Sherry is sharing earlier, for our caregivers. So to get started, there's one here that they're saying check out the elder care locator, or
Yes.
there's local area agency on aging. It says
Yes, so
AAA.
eldercare.gov is the AAA's, that's the area agencies on aging. So that's their resource online. I don't remember the phone number, but there's also a phone number if you go onto their website, but eldercare.gov, and that will help you find that those respite services and other services like meal delivery or transportation or whatever you need in your local community. Because, you know, that's where we need the help, is in the local communities. And I call them the boots on the ground. Those are the boots on the ground that'll help you find the resources that you need.
Wow, it's really a pleasure to have you with us, Sherry. And when Sherry mentioned you and I looked you up, I was like, wow, that would be great to have you.
Well, I'm
So,
thrilled to be with you. I was so excited when Sherry reached out to me. I said, yes, I'd love to talk to Marie and, and talk to your listeners and everything. So thank you.
wealth and information and outpouring passion. I can really feel your passion about this topic. And so we are very blessed to have Sherry Snelling with us tonight. And do you have any last words of wisdom to our listeners out there?
I just want to say thank you, because I don't know that caregivers get thanked enough. And so thank you for your service. Without you, the healthcare system would fall apart. I always call caregivers our nation's largest volunteer healthcare army. So thank you for doing what you do. And again, we want to care for you. We're a nation of caregivers. So let's come together to help each other out and find that break that you need to be the best caregiver. And just, thank you, and happy National Family Caregiver Month, and happy holidays to everybody.
Yes, thank you again, Sherry. And thank you to PHLV Radio, our community partners, giving us this platform to share this very important information to our listeners out there. So remember, every Monday is a healthy Monday. Aloha.